Namaste to all of you. Thank you, Savita ji, for inviting me to give this presentation. The topic is a quote from William Shakespeare. You are all students of literature, teachers of literature, and so I'm sure you're all familiar with this quote from William Shakespeare from the play As You Like It. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. I remember studying this play As You Like It when I was in school, St. Xavier's School, Kolkata, way back, 1973 perhaps. And then a couple of decades later, I had the opportunity of studying this once again while exploring a course on English MA at Mysore University. And these lines still ring in my mind. They're very powerful. And what I wish to present here is a different interpretation from an Advaita perspective. So let's start the presentation. So I'm setting the stage for the presentation with this picture and the quote by the character Shark in Shakespeare's As You Like It. The quote is, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages." The 7 ages referred to are, as you can see, infancy, schoolboy, teenager, youth, middle age, old age, and extreme old age. Shakespeare was a playwright, and in his plays you had acts, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, as you know, and in each of the acts you had scenes, Scene 1, Scene 2, Scene 3, etc. So he visualized the life of every individual to be also made up of 7 acts, as you can see. But the character Shark has a rather melancholy interpretation of the entire life in all the acts. Talks about infancy all being about mewling and puking, and the schoolboy and the teenager a woeful ballad. And you can imagine what it's like when it's old age and extreme old age. Life can be terrible. So this was the interpretation given in this monologue by Shark. We have a parallel in other examples in world literature, and I wish to refer to Indian literature. For example, Adi Shankara's Tattva Bodha, where he refers to 6 acts. Asti, he goes before infancy to conception, when the fetus starts in the mother's womb. Existence starts then, Asti. And then Jayate, there is the birth of the child. Then it grows, Vardhate, it matures into youthfulness, Viparinamate, and then the decay starts in the body, and that's called Apakshiyate, and it gradually deteriorates, and then finally, alas, it must perish, and that is called Vinashyati. Another unique feature about Indian aesthetics, for example, in Natya Shastra, is in drama, in play acting, the important thing is to act so well, to depict all the rasas. You can see the navrasas here, so that the audience is completely taken in and really resonates with the feelings of all the actors. And a good actor is one who will get the audience to sit at the edge of their seats and to really make them start believing whatever is being enacted on stage. The problem comes in real life. In real life, it's not play acting, it's living what is apparently real. And so, for example, in this picture, one would love to have the Shringara Rasa or the Hasya Rasa with one's playmate. But life can get quite difficult and sometimes miserable if your spouse is habitually with a Raudra Bhava or Vibhatsa or Bhayanaka. So you can understand the implications of these rasas. And you have here a male actor, as you very well know, who demonstrates a similar capacities. I'm showing you pictures of a popular serial which is now being replayed, the Ramayana. And what is noteworthy is on stage you have the villain, in this case Ravana, and the hero, Lord Ram. They play their roles convincingly. But they also know while enacting that it's a play. They know that it's only an act. And then when they go back to the green room, they are the good old friends they've always been. So there is an absolute clarity about the difference between appearance and reality. But for us who play the game of life in real life, we see it all as one reality, and that's a huge difference. Here's a picture of drama in real life where we put on an act. We have personas. The very word persona means a mask, and who we are is something that is known only to us, and perhaps not even known to us. And that's when life can become challenging and difficult. So the big question, which is explored here in self-inquiry, is who are we behind the masks that we exhibit? Do we really know? Do we want to know? The other good thing about a drama or any performance is that there's always a distance between the actor and the audience. Even in the privacy of our bedroom, and that's what we're all doing now in lockdown times, we watch the digital screen. And the story, the drama that unfolds in the screen is something happening out there. There is not only distance, there's a feeling of spaciousness in which you can see the drama unfolding. You know it's happening out there. And yes, you are taken up by whatever is happening out there, but there are periods and there are intervals where you get back to reality and you know that it's just a drama. The drama is out there, and I, the witness, am here, and I'm safe. I'm not getting murdered. I need not feel afraid. I need not feel terror. I am safe. And that safety is a peculiar strength of the witness, which enables the witness to enjoy the drama. And It doesn't matter whether you're watching a comedy or a romance or even a horror scene. It's all enjoyable. And so the word play itself depicts that. We talk about play. A play is a play. It's meant for play. It's meant for entertainment. It's meant for fun. It's meant for enjoyment. All this is possible provided there is that ambience of spaciousness and distance. But what if the drama is my life? As Shakespeare is pointing out, uh, there's no distance there. Or is there? The same can be applied to any game. We've probably played this game, Monopoly, or as it's called, Trade in India. Um, it's played for fun. It's played by family members. There's money at stake, but it's all paper money, fake money. And then you play this game where you build imaginary houses and you win a lottery, or you might go to jail, you might lose everything. All that is played with good fun. And in a family, the elders actually like to lose to the youngsters. And nobody takes it seriously. But in real life, and actually real life is supposed to be just like that, but we don't see it like that. Everything is important. We actually think we make money or we lose money, or we build houses and we lose houses. Now the Bhagavad Gita, for example, um, says even real life has to be played in exactly the same way. Here's a quote. It says, Sukha dukkhe same kritva. Treat alike pleasure and pain. Labha alabha jaya ajaya. Treat alike gain and loss, victory and defeat. The person who can do this will never face misery, will always enjoy life. And this is what the scripture, the whole treatise of the Gita encourages us to do. Enjoy life, even in the battlefield, because you know it's a game. Or do we know? So there in the movie or in the play you had many actors, but here in real life I'm the actor and I have to play many roles. I play the role of an employee, sometimes a leader, a colleague, a friend, a spouse, a parent or a child, a sibling, a social worker. And the miseries pointed out by Shakespeare apply only when these roles are operational. And sometimes these roles are conflicting, and one is pulled in many directions. If only we knew that these are only roles. What is common to all the roles is the same self. What is common to those 7 acts that Shakespeare pointed out is it's the same self that goes through all the acts. And the sense of I as an infant, I as a child, I as a schoolboy, I as a teenager, as a middle-aged person, old age, that I somehow does not change. What changes is the role, and the role keeps changing. And all our problems in life are invariably associated with those changes, with those roles. Nothing happens to the self. It's so important to understand and realize this. But we get caught up in the roles, and here's a lovely book called Leadership and Self-Deception, which talks of drama in organizations. People who came together to help an organization succeed actually end up delighting in each other's failures and resenting each other's successes. Now, you're all coming from different academic institutions, and you know very well what we are talking about. We withhold information and resources from one another, try to control one another, and blame one another. When I'm blaming A or B or Department XYZ and suggesting that all our problems will be solved if only they straighten up, I'm doing it because their shortcomings justify my failure to improve. Very profound, insightful statements. So, what begins as a conflict between two persons spreads to a war between many. Finally, organizations are filled with people whose energies are largely spent on sustaining pollution. Sounds familiar? We say life is stressful, and especially in these pandemic times, doubly stressful. Well, they've always been stressful, and somehow the wise individual is one who not only handles that stress very well, but is also very efficient, productive, and cheerful. What's the secret? So let's look at it uh, in, in these terms. These are somewhat scientific terms. We'll make it simple. You have an x-axis, which talks of how you perform. On the right side, it's all green, you perform extremely well. On the left side, it's all red, you perform badly. In the y-axis, we have an energy level. Usually during the working hours, during the daytime, we are all aroused, we have high energy. And in the evening, when we go back home, we are meant to relax and take rest. So we are tired, so we have a low energy level. And we have in our bodies a system called the autonomic nervous system, ANS, which is said to be sympathetic when it is aroused, and when it is relaxed, it is said to be parasympathetic. The real challenge is to allow that system to operate with balance. So if you're on the green side, it is balanced. If you're on the red side, it is unbalanced. What does that mean? It means that instead of being balanced and sympathetic, you become oversympathetic, you become hyperactive, you become overstressed. And in the evening, when you go back, instead of switching off all that stress and relaxing, you carry your office work home, all your troubles, and so you are still switched on. So your energy is getting dissipated, so you are still sympathetic when you should be parasympathetic. On the green side, you will know it because you will feel good, you will feel positive, while you will feel negative on the red side. What are some positive emotions that you experience? Exhilaration, passion, joy, love, care, kindness, appreciation, harmony, beauty. It's important to recognize that there's an origin where the measure is zero, and at the extreme right hand you have plus infinity. So there's no limit to the extent you can experience goodness and happiness and well-being in life. On the negative side, you tend to feel frustrated, angry, hostile, fearful, worried, anxious, guilty, overwhelmed, resentful, and judgmental. And that is a more familiar territory for most of us. And when we come home, It's not that we suddenly jump into the green side. And by the way, in case you don't know where you are, the doctors can always take a blood sample and check whether you have the stress hormone cortisol or you have the good DHEA. But we should all know by self-awareness. And we carry home these problems and we feel hopeless, we are in despair, we feel depressed, burnt out, we are fatigued, we feel a sense of withdrawal, we want to get away from the world, and sometimes we feel bored, and that's why we try to um, solve this by switching on the TV or the mobile and surfing all the channels. And we feel apathetic, we feel cut off from the world. On the other hand, if you're on the green side, you have inner peace, you have equanimity, you have a sense of acceptance, you forgive, you don't nurture grievances, you have serenity. It's a wonderful time for reflection and content. How wonderful it would be if we could live like this on the green side. But the harsh reality is perhaps most of us are living on the red side. And so, if we are thinking people, we should ask, what is it that we may be doing unknowingly that is pushing us onto the red? And what is it that we need to unlearn and relearn and nurture that will help us move to the green? And if you recall, the Buddha was 2,500 years ago, noted this. He said, his first noble truth is the truth of dukkha. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, disassociation from the loved is suffering, not to get what one wants is suffering. Essentially, suffering is when things happen that are contrary or not in accordance to your expectations, or when people behave in ways that you don't want them to behave. And we have very little control over that. But more so, it's because everything is changing, as indeed Shakespeare pointed out. Nothing is steady, nothing is constant, everything is anitya. In Buddha's words, anityam, anityam, sarvam anityam. Everything is transient. He went further and said, it's not that you have 7 acts or you have so many scenes per act. Every moment is uncertain. The word he used was kshanigam. Kshanigam, kshanigam, sarvam kshanigam. And even deeper, there's nothing solid about anything. So he went on to say, shunyam, shunyam, sarvam shunyam. Everything is empty. And because we are attached to the things that we love and we want, that attachment causes us suffering. And thereby, dukkham, dukkham, sarvam dukkham. But in more recent times, Thoreau said this, the mass of men and women lead lives of quiet desperation. Look at the choice of words, quiet desperation. Thoreau went on to say, in the morning I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmological philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, in comparison with which our modern world and its literature seem puny and trivial. So I'm using this opportunity to bring you a little taste of what is it that points out in the Bhagavad Gita to the very opposite of suffering. Instead of dukkham, the direction that is pointed out is ananda. So really our common project is A, freedom from suffering, and B, a sense of total peace and happiness. In our literature, it's not just dukkha nivritti and Sukha Prapti. But ideally, it is Atyantika Dukkha Nivriti. That means a complete cessation of suffering, and Paramananda Prapti, uh, an attainment of a state of fullness, of completeness that never changes. So, in the spectrum between despair and fulfillment, with material success in between, where are we most of the time? Are we on the reddish end of the spectrum or the other end? And is it possible humanly to be consistently, in a sense, with a sense of fulfillment? Now, we know that when we are in trouble, physically, when the body is ill or sick, we necessarily must take some kind of medicine. We see the doctor. But often the sickness is psychological, and we are in need of counseling. And the counselor himself or herself has to be in a state of peace and happiness, which again is a big question mark. Sometimes you go to psychiatry, that's all modern science, but then there are also alternative systems of treatment. Then the option is faith and prayer, which works for some of us. And then there is yoga and meditation. In Patanjali's system of yoga, the culmination is samadhi, which is actually freedom from all vibrations in the mind. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga popularly is understood as something good for the body, as an exercise, which is true, which is also necessary. But then we don't realize that yoga literally means union with the one, the source of everything. And in the Ashtanga system, that stage of asana is to be preceded by a moral purification, yama and niyama, and then asana is followed by pranayama, and then there's a pratyahara, which is rarely discussed in yoga clinics, where you have to learn to withdraw, followed by dharana, jnana, and finally samadhi. And then the Gita especially talks a lot about working, and working skillfully, with equipoise, connected to the divine. That's known as karma yoga. All this is fine, but the item that we're going to look at in this presentation is jnana yoga, which says really all you need to do is to wake up, awaken through a process of self-inquiry. While now, we are not advocating anything here. Do what you find is suitable to you. But as we listen, it's best to suspend your hard beliefs on the other issues and see and give this a shot and see if this can really work. I want to give a quote here from Kabir, which Doha, which we surely would have studied in school, a lovely Doha, which points out to the fact that we seek happiness in things outside, in the world outside. And the metaphor given here is that of the deer, a special species of deer called Kasturi. Kasturi kundal base, mrig dhoondhe ban mahi. So the deer can feel somehow, in the poet's imagination, the fragrance that is actually emanating from its own intestines, from within itself. But it searches for it in the world, in the forest outside. Jo ghat ghat Ram hai, duniya dekhe nahi. Likewise, all of us are looking for our happiness in things outside, and we really fail to realize, the whole world fails to realize that it's all within. So it was Swami Vivekananda who said this, arise, awake, which are words from the Kathopanishad. Stop not till the goal is reached. And what he meant by the goal was not success. He meant fulfillment in the sense of complete awakening. This is just an introduction, but I think it's important to do this. We have this self with which we identify. It's called Jiva, the separate self, the individual. And we have this world out there, Jagat. Now we know very well that we are puny little figures in the world outside. We have very limited capacity, power. The world is all powerful outside, and we feel a sense of limitation, finitude, lack, want. We think that all our wants can be satisfied by things outside in the world. So the first thing we feel is a sense of lack and unease. And this is something that we never somehow are able to get rid of. And this drives us to the world outside, and we see so many fascinating objects promising happiness, and we are attracted to these objects, things and people and power, and that is known as raga, that basic attraction, which also ends up in attachment. And so we exert ourselves to get these, and these are, at least in the Indian tradition, are legitimate pursuits. The three purusharthas, artha, which means the pursuit of security, wealth, kama, which is entertainment, pleasure, fun, and but provided everything is morally permissible, we take into consideration the requirements of others. So dharma is very important. That is what is often overlooked. You find in all our academic institutions, people talk of the need to bring in values and so on. It's bringing in dharma. And so this outward movement is called pravritti to the objects that promise happiness in pursuit of artha and kama, following dharma, ideally. Sometimes we do adharma, that's a different matter. And yes, we do experience happiness, but unfortunately, as the Buddha pointed out, it's short-lived, it's temporary. And so what happens is we get back into our ease. We also find that the things and people we interact with bring in ill will in us, aversion sometimes, not the opposite of attraction. It's called dvesha. And we are also having a tremendous sense of fear, bhaya. The things we have, we are afraid we lose them, and we are afraid that we will get things and illnesses, especially the coronavirus in today's time, and we are mortally afraid what will happen to us. And so this merry-go-round is where we are stuck. Some people call this a sorry-go-round. It's samsara. From lack and unease, we move to objects that promise happiness. We struggle hard. We get some of these things. It gives us happiness, but then again, it wears out, and then the unease is back, and we keep going round and round and round, and this is samsara. Almost all of us are caught in this, and you can approach extreme old age and still be stuck here. And this is a trap. And this is the reason why we find that we are caught in misery. Now, in self-inquiry, we go to the basics of this, and we realize that this daily project of managing despair is not such a great thing to do. And so, in order to get to the root of it, we are told, we discover that the root is actually ignorance, called avidya. And ignorance is basically not knowing who we are. We are playing many roles without knowing who is playing all these roles. Who is the self? And that is what self inquiry is all about. And it demands something that we are not used to doing. We are used to moving outward, pravritti. And one of the reasons why we are moving outwards is all our sense organs point outward. The eyes look out, the ears listen outwardly, and so on, the nose and so on. All the five senses are outwardly poised. Well, now and then we must withdraw from that activity which keeps us bound in the cycle and go inward. And this is unfortunately something completely lost in today's education, though it was of high priority once upon a time in India. And that inner movement is called nivritti, the opposite of pravritti. The real objective of nivritti is to get vidya, is to root out avidya, which means discovering who I am. And this is known as self-realization. It leads us to the fourth uh, purushartha, which not many people want, which is liberation, moksha. It is only this moksha that gives you atyantika dukkha nivritti, complete cessation of misery, and paramananda prapti. You discover the highest happiness. Now we all identify with the body, and the world is out there, the body is in here. The world we perceive through our senses, not just our eyes alone, and so the perceiver is the self. What is perceived is the world, and the world is perceived through the five senses, sense perceptions. And the world is filled with things, matter, and it's funny, but the awareness of the body and the awareness of the world arise simultaneously, both being made of matter, but the awareness of both arise in the mind, which is again internal to us. And then we also experience sensations in the body, emotions, thoughts, images, memories, etc. That's all in the sector of the mind. So the self identifies with the body and the mind and imagines that the mind is encased in the body. In fact, what we refer to as not me or the world is usually defined by whatever lies outside the boundaries of my skin, which is the normal identification. Now, this whole world of matter in Sanskrit is referred to as Bhuta Akasha, Bhuta Akasha, the Panchabhuta, you from which all matter is said to be made. That whole world is called Bhuta Akasha. And the inner world of the mind is called Chitta Akasha. Chitta means mind. Chitta Akasha. And it's interesting, but the Bhuta Akasha can also only be sensed in the Chitta Akasha. We have no direct access because all we know is what we perceive. And the perception is finally registered in the mind. The eyes behold objects, and we are told that there's light falling at the back of the lens of the eye, the retina, and we are even told that the eye has a convex lens and the image that falls is inverted and diminished. But actually the eye doesn't see. The rods and cones at the back of the eye transmit a signal to the brain, and in the brain somehow magically it's all unfolded and reorganized. But what we see is an image. Image is linked to imagination. What we see is a thought, is more thought-like than matter-like. And we presume that there is matter out there. And this is all very consistent because all of us see the same world outside without realizing that we are seeing it in our minds. In Nivritti, so the eyes really don't see, it's the mind that sees, but even the mind doesn't see. Something inside more subtle than the mind sees. And in the process of Nivritti, we realize, for example, right now, I want to ask you this question. Are you aware? You can close your eyes and you are bound to answer yes, but only after checking within. Say, yes, you are conscious, you are aware. And the next question to ask is that awareness real? Yes, you can check and you realize it is so. The third question to ask is, does that awareness have any boundary? Is it dependent on the world, on the body? Or is it limitless, independent? That is the kind of inquiry that you need to do. And if you succeed, you know the truth. You are awareness. You are not the body or the mind, you are something deep inside. And it is that aware presence, I am and I know that I am, which remains unchanged through all the acts that apparently the body and the mind go through. And that makes a huge shift if you can really understand what that means. So we have another space of awareness, which is the substrate of the very basis in which everything is unfolded, and that is called Chit. And that space can be called Chit Akasha or Chidakasha. It is in Chidakasha that Chittakasha is revealed and Bhutakasha is revealed. So let's talk of an interaction between two people, me and you. You are out there and I'm in here, and I recognize you have a body-mind complex just as I have a body-mind complex. But you is something that I see in me. I can never get to know you. I can only get to know an idea of you. It's very important because often we mistake and we say, you're a lousy person. But I'm referring to my image of you, my idea of you, which keeps changing. If you do good to me, if you sing praises of me, my idea of you is a wonderful person. But if you go around gossiping about me and telling horror stories about me, you're a horrible person. So basically, we live in the realm of ideas because we can never access what's really out there. Similarly, we have an idea of the world. All these ideas are in here, in our imagination, and they're all subjective. Uh, they're actually a system of beliefs. And unfortunately, the beliefs, like the roles, are only beliefs. They're not true. And they keep changing. And they are in the realm of Chitta Akasha. What is unchanging? And this is very important to understand. What is absolute, unchanging, in the presence of ever-changing beliefs and worlds is the aware presence, which is common to all of us. And there are these vibrations called chitta vrittis, ever-changing, that toss us, that come in tidal waves, and that tends to make us lose ourselves. For most of us who have not glimpsed our reality, then we are fully tossed up and down. We are trapped, we identify with our roles, and we mistake the appearance for the reality. You can see that it's just a changing form, a vibration which comes and goes, only if you can play the role of a true witness. And then you get that space that we talked of earlier. You have the comfort of sitting in the sofa and watching the movie play out. Whether it plays out in the world or in your own life, it's still a movie. So the world, the stage of the world, is just a drama unfolding in our minds. The body is also sensations which are unfolding in Chidakasha, and so is the mind. So our whole understanding of the world's a stage completely changes when we see that everything is a stage. And the best part of it is, I am not that. It's just something that's playing out. And this understanding you can understand better with this metaphor. Let's say something horrible happens out of the blue. If I'm identified with the body mind, with a finite, powerless individual, it's like water contained in a small beaker. And somebody's injected some red dye. And then because the beaker is very small, the dye is going to spread out and soon the whole glass will look like red water. And so that's how easily I get affected and it stays for a long time. But if I have discovered who I am, the vastness of the aware presence, then it's like being a big lake. And if life were to inject something in the natural course, inject some red dye, what would happen? Nothing would happen. It would just move. It would just go away and without leaving a trace. That's how Jnanis live their lives. I am the witness, ever unperturbed. The Chidakasha also talks of space. Akasha is the space. Space is very subtle. Space is not affected by what happens in that space. And that's a good way to live life. So our real problem, and it's a serious problem, it's a deep problem, is that we misidentify ourselves with the roles we play. The body-mind is a role. And so if someone asks us, who are you? We tell them what we really believe. I am so-and-so, I'm a professor, or I'm a son of so-and-so, or a spouse of so-and-so. And even after retirement, you find people keep identifying themselves as former professor. All that is myth. It's not who we are. We are simple, formless, aware presence. And because of avidya, because of ignorance, we have a sense of misidentification. The Sanskrit word for that is adhyasa, which literally means superposition. We superpose the role of body-mind onto the aware presence and bring this connection, and then we say, I am so and so. So the true self becomes the apparent self. The reality becomes the appearance. And this is disaster. You will not enjoy life the way it can be enjoyed, and you will suffer. That's what happens to all of us, and that's what Shakespeare's verse is all about. When he talks of the 7 ages, it comes from saying, I am the body. Primarily, I am the body. And if I am the body, then I am born and I will die. So there's birth, there is aging, and aging is terrible. Grey hair, I want to paint black. If I lose hair, I cry. My looks are so important. aware presence, which was beautiful and formless and boundaryless, suddenly has birth, age, looks. It also has gender, male, female, and then you have all kinds of belief systems. It has a color, the skin has a color, aware presence, which is transparent, suddenly gains a color and say, I am dark, I am fair, and then the body gets sick and it will die eventually. But aware presence is actually not affected. So you see the trouble and the danger that this misidentity can do. And going back to the Gita, when Arjuna cries and tells his charioteer Krishna, look, there's no way I can kill uh, Bhishma and Drona. They are my gurus. And he gets into a mournful state, into a vishada, where he says, what does it? What does killing do? And Krishna and the Gita is correcting him and telling us at the same time, you have to understand that you are not the body. Nainam chindanti shastrani. Weapons do not cut it, the true self. Nainam dahati pavaka. Fire does not burn it, water cannot drench it, wind cannot dry it, etc. Beautiful verse, but very few people understand what is being truly pointed at. Doesn't stop here. We identify with caste, with religion. We are backward or we are forward. We are Hindu or we are Muslim or we are atheist or we are Christian. And then we fight. Aware presence, no such thing. And then there's nationality. We're India, and then you're Indian, you're not Pakistani, you're not Chinese, you're not American. You're either ashamed or you are proud. Aware presence has no idea about this. In fact, it's the same aware presence in all nationalities. And most important, it is because of the body identification called Dehatma Bhava that you have relations in the first place. You have your blood relation or your friends. And all the things that you say, me and mine, they all come because of the body. In deep sleep, you drop all of them. And then you start comparing and feeling your lack, and then you know what happens. You feel lust, kama, you feel anger, krodha, you feel greed, lobha, you feel attachment, moha, you feel arrogance, mada, and you feel envy, matsarya, and the whole game starts and you are lost in that. Who am I? I am aware presence. How do you know? Just pause, close your eyes, and feel it. I am. I am that I am, as the Bible puts it. Aham Brahmasmi. But then the superposition comes, and then I think I am X. X is a problem. X is a role. If you see it as a role, it's not a problem. X is this body, this mind, this ego, this ahankara. Technically, these are called upadhis. Upadhi is an instrument. Upadhi is a disguise. Upadhi is a means to manifest. Upadhi is a means to celebrate life, joy. But it can also be a hindrance, and it often is when we identify ourselves with the role. When I say I am suffering or I am feeling depressed, X becomes that. Who is suffering? Suffering is something that happens to the mind. Depression is something that happens to the mind. I am not the mind. That is also called kshetra. That is the kshetra dharma. It will react the way it is. If it's an untrained mind, it will suffer. But if I can stand apart and see, then I also see that suffering will come and go, and then it doesn't last. It's like this. Everything comes and goes. Anityam, anityam, sarvam anityam. And instead of saying, I am the body, look at the difference in understanding. I am aware of the body. I am aware of the mind. I am aware of the feeling of suffering. I am aware of the feeling of depression. Or even better, those chitta vrittis are arising now in my awareness and they are going away in my awareness. Where do they arise from? Where do they disappear? There's a lovely line again in the Gita which says the secret is to be nirmamo nirahankara. Nirmama, free from the feeling mine. Nirahankara, free from the feeling I, ahankara. But the rest of the verse is also beautiful because once you realize you are boundaryless awareness, you are that which is common to all, then you can't have any hatred. Adveshta sarva bhutana. No ill will to any being. Forget human beings, any sentient being. Sarva bhutana, all beings. Maitra, on the other hand, friendship. Karuna, compassion, evacha. Nirmamo nirahankara. Sama dukkha sukha kshami. Very important. You develop equipoise because you are able to see dukkha, sukha with the same eye because they're all sprouting from the same awareness and receding back to the same awareness. And not only that, you are able to forgive anybody. Shami. This is equipoise. And Gita goes on to say this is true yoga. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Let's get to the essence of Advaita. You are, I am, we all are formless, aware presence if we only knew. So is the world. The essence of the world is that. The whole cosmos is that. Any event that takes place is a cosmic event. And yes, there is this body and mind, the jiva, which I recognize, which is a localization of consciousness. But the stuff of the jiva and the jagat is the same being awareness that is limitless. It's the only stuff there is. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, it's beautifully referred to in this sutra. It says, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. First of all, that awareness has no boundaries. It is limitless. It has no limit. Anantam. Only something that is formless is limitless. Anantam. Satya, which means ever unchanging truth, ever unchanging reality, ever unchanging existence. Something that has the potential to manifest in any way, but it's essentially formless, aware presence. How do you know? That's where jnanam comes from, because you know it. Finally, it's the nature of awareness. It's a presence that is self-aware. Satyam jnanam anantam. And what is the stuff that it's made of? Another version of it is Sat Chit Ananda. Sat meaning Satyam, existence which is unchanging. Chit, which is of the nature of knowing awareness, jnanam, and Ananda, which is the basic peace and happiness that is inherent. That is the Swarupa, the basic nature of everything, including you and me. And there's this lovely line from the Gita which says this. Nasato vidyate bhava, na bhavo vidyate sataha. That which is the unchanging reality, the Sat, the Satya, never ceases to exist. If you began like that, you will remain like that. And that which is not asatya never comes to be. So the only reality there is everywhere. It's an unchanging reality. It is one without a second. Hence the term Advaita. No two, just one. And it's captured in this Mahavakya, which comes in the Chandogya Upanishad, which says Tat Tvam Asi. Tat, that, that mysterious, formless, aware presence, Tvam, you are. In modern language, very simply, you're it. Do you know it? If so, you are liberated. Now, to make this simple, some people like Alan Watts um, told stories. So here's a story that I'd like to give. It's a story for children, and in the spiritual life, we are all children. He says, we all know that God is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient, and formless. And in a state of total peace and happiness, wanting to express that happiness, wanting to have fun. That's the word Alan Watts used. Wanting to play. So to play, you need a stage. The world is a stage, Shakespeare said. So God wanted to play. You also need people. You need another person to play with. The trouble is, of course, God can do anything, so create a clone, but then it's not fun if you both know who you are. So the secret in the game, in God's game, is to hide that truth through ignorance. That's what He did. God created this world with all these things and people with the secret that it's like hide and seek. You don't get to know who you are. That's like a treasure hunt. You will have to figure it out yourself. And the Jnani is the one who's figured out what that is, but most of us are Ajnani, and so we live that life searching for who we are, partly enjoying, partly suffering, till you say, I've had enough, I need to wake up, and then you can do your sadhana, wake up, and then when you go back to the world and you play the game, that's when the real fun starts. And that is when life becomes play. Ramana Maharshi, great Jnani, said this beautifully. Everyone is aware of two things, namely himself, the seer, the witness, and the world which he sees. And he assumes that they are both real. But that alone is real, which has a continuous existence, which is unchanging. Judged by this test, the two, the seer and the spectacle, are both unreal. These two appear intermittent. They are apparent in the waking and dream states alone. In the state of deep sleep, they cease to appear. That is, they appear when the mind is active and disappear as soon as the mind ceases to function. Therefore, the two are but thoughts of the mind. They are, to use the language we used a little earlier, they are chitta vrittis. In deep sleep, they are both gone. When you wake up, they arise and cause trouble. You don't know what they are. There must be something from which the mind arises and into which it subsides. That something must have a continuous, uninterrupted existence. That is, it must be the reality. That is the Swarupa. And look at him. He realized this on his own, without any teacher, without any book, as a 16-year-old boy. And that understanding never left him till the body died. So there is this background awareness, Chidakasha, in which spring up Chittakasha and in turn Bhutakasha. So we'll try to use Ramana's suggestion, and we looked at our own life in terms of three acts. All of us do this. Every day we have Act 1, which is the Jagrat Avastha, the waking world. In the waking world, we identify or tend to identify with the body and mind. We take it seriously, except for the Jnani who is also awake, but truly awake, and knows that it's just a role, it's just a chitta vritti. Then we get tired and we go to sleep. When we sleep, Act 2 starts. That's the dream world. The body is tired and the body goes to sleep. The body is dropped. In the dream world, you have no body. Or you realize that you are lying down in bed, but the moment you've slipped into dream, you have actually created a new world. And who's done it? You yourself have done it, because you have the potential. After all, you are that, having infinite powers. And a dream world is created. If someone comes and tells you in the dream world, this is just a dream, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe it. You would say rubbish. And so you either enjoy the dream, if it's a good dream, or you suffer. If it's a nightmare, it's terrible. But then what is working is not that body in the waking world, it is your mind. It is only Chittakasha. Bhutakasha has gone. It's all an imagined world. And that world is borrowed from the memories that you gained in your waking world. And all your desires come into play, and then all kinds of dramas are enacted, and it can become quite weird. But while dreaming, you don't see it as weird. It's when you wake up, you say, I had a really weird dream. So the dream world is not to be devalued, in the sense that we spend 8 hours sleeping. 1/3 of our lives are spent in the dream and deep sleep world. It's important to note that that world can be experienced only through the eyes of a dreamed up character with which we tend to identify. We look through the eyes of that dream character which participates in the world. In the dream world, you create 10,000 things, and you create one mind body that you identify with, and the rest of it is not me. It's the world. You see how silly it is? You realize that that world which you created and that individual which you chose to identify with, on waking up, you realize the whole thing was your own creation. The whole thing was a creation of Chittakasha, which was lit up. How do you get the light to see the world? There's no sun there. It's the light coming from within you, from the Chidakasha. But then the mind also gets tired dreaming, and it also falls into sleep. And then Act 3 starts. And Act 3 is deep sleep. Deep sleep is a mysterious world. There's no world, because the body is not there, it's gone. The mind is not there, it's gone. At the same time, you can't report from deep sleep. We're now discussing in waking state. But when you wake up, you recall that you did not die. Clearly shows that you can live very well without the body and the mind. In fact, you live the best, because it's a state of ananda. It's a wonderful state, full of joy, peace and happiness. No one to trouble you or disturb you. No thoughts. Wonderful. And when you wake up in the morning, if you pause to recollect, ask yourself what's happening. How did you wake up? Why did you wake up? Who wakes up? So you find our daily ritual is Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and we seem to ignore or forget that all this is unfolding in the fourth state, It's not really a state, the Turiyam, which is the world of the Chidakas. Now, I might as well tell some story. There are many versions of the story. King Janaka and his guru Ashtavakra. So King Janaka once discovered that he was lying down in bed and he found his sentry waking him up and saying that the kingdom is being attacked. And so he, being the king, had to put on his dress, armor, and lead his army to fight the invader. And it so happened that he lost. He was caught. The enemy was gracious and said, "You being a king, we will let you off under the condition you will not stay back in this land." If you recall, Janaka was the king of Mithila. That's where Sita was born. And so he lost his kingdom. He was in dire straits. The people in his kingdom, he was also very hungry, but people were afraid of the tyrant who had come, so he didn't get his food. So he walked and walked and finally crossed over to distant lands. He was tired, hungry, bitter, feeling miserable, and badly in need of water and food. And finally, he found that in some kind of an ashram, people were being given food and water. He stood in line, being very obedient. And when his turn came, he came to know that they were already scraping the bottom and there was no gruel left. It's just gruel, rice gruel. And he wept. Then the person looked at him, old man, distressed, and he said, "Very little left at the bottom, will that do?" He said, "Yes, please, that will do." And he was given a small container, wooden pot, and this little bit of gruel, last bit of gruel, was poured into it, and he was about to take it to his mouth and drink, and lo and behold, a hawk in the sky, for some reason, picked on him, came directly and knocked this vessel out of his hand. It fell down to the ground, it broke, and whatever was in it got spilled out. And that was too much for Janaka. He burst out crying. He started rolling in the ground and saying, "Woe is me!" And at that time, he woke up in his bed and he realized something was different. Alarmed, his sentry outside came in, heard his cry, and said, "Master, what happened? What's the problem?" But the dream was so powerful, so real, so fascinating that Janaka had a doubt whether that was real or this was real. Is this true or that true? Satyam idam va adam. Or in Hindi, if you like it better, ye sach ya wo sach. And he was in this contemplative mood, and the sentries went and called his wife. Wife came in and asked, "What's the matter?" But the king had only one mantra to give. Ye sach ya wo sach. The queen realized that perhaps the old man was in some trouble, the beginning of senility perhaps, and then they called all the doctors, but this condition will not change in Janaka. And he was like that. He held court, but his mind was not there. He kept muttering to himself, is this true or was that true? And word spread, and the whole kingdom came to know that the old man had kind of lost it. And as luck would have it, his guru, Ashtavakra, happened to visit, and he heard this. And Ashtavakra, being a jnani, knew what was going on. He came directly to the king and asked him, what's the matter with you, King Janaka? And the king said, in reply, is this true or is that true? Now, the sage Ashtavakra could understand what was in his mind. So he countered this question with another question. He said, you have this kingdom in front of you. When you were out there begging for food, having lost everything, was this kingdom there? And Janaka says, no, it is not there. And vice versa. Was it there? He said, no. So he says, what do you conclude? Na ye sach, na wo sach. Neither is this true, nor is that true. So Janaka says, do you mean to say there's nothing true, there's no reality? Then Ashtavakra says, there is only one reality. What is common to this and that is you. You alone are true. Sirf tu hi sach. Because Tattvamasi, you are that one presence which is your only truth. Alan Watts is another story and I suggest you look this up in the internet. It says, what if you could control your dreams? Where, let's say you could dream any dream you want. What would you dream? So typically, depending on your stage in life, you would dream for those things that you want and you don't have. You would dream for a good life. You would dream for having those lovely things that you can't afford, those beautiful relationships that you didn't have, and they would come true. Let's say you lived that life, what would happen after that? You would soon get tired of that and you would something more. Maybe you would want power, you would want, or you would want to be Superman, saving damsels in distress and doing wonderful things, saving the world. And you would like to play that part. Well, you would play that part for long and then you would get tired of it and then you would say maybe you want to be all powerful and control everybody and everything, you would become a megalomaniac, as many of our politicians tend to become, and you would play that part, and then after some time, because everything is predictable, it's no longer fun. Then maybe you start realizing that the real fun comes when you don't know what's going to happen next, and you like suspense and you start giving up your power, giving up your control, and finally when you give up all that, you really forget that you had all this power and imagination, you would end up to exactly where you are right now. That's why you're living the life that you have now. If you wake up, you can be free. So, coming to our conclusion, life is a flow. It's all happening out there on its own. It is all an expression of aware presence. And you can see that water is carrying its bubbles and fishes and snakes and whatnot. It's a part of a natural rhythm of life. You are the water. As you watch, whatever life is presenting to you at this very moment, it's exactly the same. It's flowing. It's flowing from a mysterious awareness, which you are. And in that quiet flow, when you can really soak it in, you are no longer the perceiver perceiving the perceived. It all melts into one. The subject object identity separation also dissolves. And that is the highest state, the Sahaj state of Advaita. The peace and happiness that are inherent in formlessness, in stillness, express themselves in form and activity. And that's just the way it is. It's all happening on its own. It's a play of aware presence. And the Gita points this out very powerfully. Prakrite kriyamanani gune karmani sarvasha. Actions are entirely done by the modes, the triguna, sattva, rajas, and tamas of nature. It's all one actually. There's only one player. But ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The deluded ego self imagines, I am the doer. I am the doer. And that is the big mistake. I'll end with a story from a famous story about Tansin and Akbar. You remember Akbar had his Navaratnas and Tansin was his court and one of his favorites, and he would want to hear Tansin sing. He was one of the greatest singers India had ever produced. One day Tansen was asked by Akbar, you sing so well, where did you learn this? Who's your guru? And he says, my guru is Swami Haridas. He says, I want to listen to your guru. Please ask him to come here and play in my court. Tansen says, you don't know my guru. He doesn't obey any other's commands. So he will not obey your order. Akbar said, okay, in that case, I will go and listen to him. Tell me where he is. He said, I don't know. He lives in a mountain cave. We'll have to travel far. And he will not entertain people like you. You may be the Shahenshah, but for him, you're nobody. Akbar was thrilled. He thought this was a challenge. He said, let me go in disguise. Tansen had his misgivings, but he had to finally obey the emperor. And both of them traveled a long way and reached the cave. This is one version of the story where Swami Haridas was living quietly, playing his music. The moment Tansen entered the cave, Haridas recognized him, but he did not like the idea of the person following him, although in disguise he knew that this was a disguise. And then Tansen pleaded with him and said, look, this man is the emperor, the Shahenshah Akbar. He has only one request. He wants to hear you sing. Swami Haridas didn't say a word. And Tansen went back to Akbar and said, I'm sorry, my master has his own mind. He does as he pleases. Akbar says, in that case, I am not going to go anywhere. I'm going to stay here till he sings. And so a day or two passed. One day early in the morning, Akbar wakes up to beautiful music. The melodious voice of Swami Haridas, early in the morning. Wakes up and he sees this old sage burst into song. He's never heard anybody sing like that. Doesn't feel time pass. The song goes on for a couple of hours and then it suddenly stops. Akbar is in a reverie, as is Tansen, and immediately wants to go and touch the feet of the great master. By the time he reaches there, Swami Haridas has vanished. Then Tansen tells Akbar that's the way the master is. He does not want any praise. he likes to live incognito. Akbar goes back, but he's very happy. And at night, he dreams of Haridas singing, and he's in that reverie. The next day in court, he orders dancing. You must be knowing the same song. Please sing. I want to hear you sing it in open court. Tansen sings, and Akbar enjoys it. Everybody claps, but when everybody's left, Akbar tells Tansen, "Look, that was very good, wonderful, but I couldn't help comparing you with your master. And I'm sorry to say, compared to Swami Haridas, you're not that great." Tansen smiled and said, I don't take it as an insult. I take it as a compliment. I am just a singer, whereas my guru is music itself. Then Akbar says, there's something more. What is the reason that he's able to sing so well? And Tansen says, you're right. I sing because you order me to sing and you are my boss. You are my paymaster. Swami Haridas sings when the aware presence in him wants to express Ananda. The Lord sings through him to the Lord. That's a huge difference. That is the play of consciousness. This is a scene from IIT Madras, where I live and teach. And occasionally we have sessions like this. This is a shot taken from a course which we offer to teachers from all over the country. It's called Self-Awareness and Higher Goals in Education, which we have in the month of June, a week-long session where we explore some of these issues. I'm sure you will be having a lot of questions and doubts. Some of them you could perhaps explore from these books, Stop Sleepwalking Through Life, which has a Hindi translation, Brahm Se Jago Sone Walo, and Spirituality as well. But really, the idea of this presentation was to stimulate your interest and so that you start waking up. So with these words, thank you all for your patience with me. Thank you.